Okay, we're taking it back to our roots with this episode. Longtime listeners know that My Home is Special started by exploring home as a country during some extended travels we were doing. Each country had 2 episodes. First, a pre-trip chat with someone from that country that shared what was special about their home, and more importantly, the stories behind why those things became so special to them. Second, a post-trip chat with each guest to discuss how we experienced the things they described during our visit, and we tried to do everything they talked about for ourselves. Those are listed as episode number and episode number R. For example, Ghana is episode 11, and the Ghana recap episode is 11R. In those recap episodes, I chat with my friend Taylor about the trip, and she also asked for a story from every country. After all, we know each other from the monthly storytelling series, Grown Folk Stories, here in Chicago. Those recaps also include sounds from each trip on our country, which was a new way for me to pay attention during our travels. I wasn't just looking for photos, I was listening for sounds too. I really encourage you to go back and check out those 15 pairs of country episodes, but for now, I'm going to try and do it all in one single episode for Guatemala, and I hope you enjoy it. With the trip coming up soon, I'm excited to take it back to the roots of the podcast with country-based episodes. And I'm excited to welcome Rocxana to the call. Rocxana, can you take a minute to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. I'm Rocxana, and I'm actually from California, but my dad's parents originated from Guatemala. My mom is originally from Guatemala, so my mom and dad actually met in Guatemala. Funny to say, my husband is also Guatemalan. So although I am from Los Angeles, California, Guatemala is my home, and I love everything about it. I actually travel to Guatemala every year as my in-laws currently do live in Guatemala. I also have more family there who live in San Martin, Jilotepeque, Chimaltenango. My 2 children love going there. In fact, my son wants to move there.
That's amazing. And Rocxana, I always like to ask so people have a sense of how we know each other. From your perspective, how would you say we know each other?
Sure. We actually know each other because you are Michelle's cousin, and I actually work with Michelle. I've known Michelle for 8 years.
Yeah, and when we decided to plan this trip, which we're going over my wife's milestone birthday, we decided maybe we'll go to Central America and we should go to Guatemala, which is actually where my grandmother is from. But I reached out to people in our newsletter and said, hey, we're probably going to go to Guatemala. Does anybody know anybody from Guatemala? Longtime listeners, Rocxana, would know that when we went to Bolivia, I basically went to the only Bolivian restaurant in Illinois and just harassed people as they were eating to see if one of them would do the interview. Luckily, I didn't have to go to a Guatemalan restaurant because Michelle reached back and said, hey, I know somebody, you should reach out to her. And I did, and here we are. So thank you very much for coming on today, and I look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get started.
Rocxana, let's get into the things that are special to you about your home, Guatemala. Where should we begin?
The first thing that I'd like to talk about is the homemade food and the hospitality. For example, the homemade tortillas, subanik, tamales, and subanik especially. That's one of my favorite foods from Guatemala. Actually, it's a comida típica, typical food from Guatemala. Mm-hmm. And I would also like to share that I did cook subanik for the first time over the Thanksgiving weekend. And it actually turned out to be really good. For my last trip, I brought some special spices to make the subanik. Let me just tell you, it turned out to be delicious.
What exactly is that? Is it chicken? Is it beef? Is it like a tamale?
Yeah, so you can add 3 types of meats. It depends on what you like to add to it. I added chicken and pork, and then you cook it with like a sauce, a tomato sauce that has tomatoes, red peppers, and then some other spices like chiles, the pasa chile, the guajillo chile. It just takes various spices and it's all cooked together. And it's kind of, it's similar to a tamale, but it's like more in a sauce type thing. And then you could eat it with tamalitos and rice. That's how it is served.
And is it the type of thing that you would eat on special occasions, or when you say it's a typical food, does that mean it's the type of thing that's just always around and you grab one when you're hungry, like a snack, like we would go grab a burger here in the U.S.?
No, so subanik is something that is served typically at parties or special occasions.
Got it, got it. And what was the occasion that you made it for here? Was it just an experiment in the kitchen after the trip, or was there something special happening?
Well, it was Thanksgiving weekend and we had my sister-in-law over, so we just decided to have family come together to my home on Saturday following the holiday. And it was just a way for all of us to get together and spend some time as a family.
The other thing that you mentioned was the hospitality in addition to the homemade food. How does that show up when you go home? Is it something about where you visit? Is it something about the number of people or the family gatherings? How does hospitality show up when you're in Guatemala?
So we stay at my in-laws' house, and just the coziness of being around all our family, everyone being together, the way we all sit together to eat breakfast, lunch, dinner. It's just that feeling of always being around the family that so close to my heart for me.
And when you say you eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner together, is that like we would do it here and you would see the family gets together for dinner, but you all would sit down and eat together 3 times a day?
Yes, yes. As crazy as that sounds, we would. I mean, family time is very important. And I just feel like there's more time to do that over there, as they are not so stuck with that daily routine as we are in the US. I feel like here in the US, we live a busier life than they do over there.
And does that bring the overall blood pressure down and help you relax when you get home?
Oh, absolutely. It definitely does. It makes me, and when I'm there, it makes me forget about the whole world, to be honest.
That's really awesome. And we talked with a bunch of people from the South American countries we visited, and they talked about something similar in that they just like spending time with family. And it was part of the culture down there to do that. And you weren't just running, grabbing a meal on the run or grabbing takeout, but that you would sit and spend hours. And Caro from Chile talked about it's the conversation after the meal that was special to her because she would just catch up with friends for hours after the meal was done. And it sounds like something similar happening in Guatemala.
Oh, for sure. And it's not just the meal, it's sitting down and having, a coffee, cafecito, and pan. That is something that it's very common there. Anywhere you go, if you go to visit someone, even if it's like a short visit and you're having a very short chat for about 10-15 minutes, you're always going to get offered café con pan, and you're always going to sit down at the table and have some fresh brewed coffee. And to me, that's something very special. Probably not the healthiest to have so much coffee, but definitely something that you get accustomed to.
Well, in a few days, we will touch down in Guatemala and I will take my chances and have all the coffee I can every chance I get.
I'm sure it will be a lot of coffee.
One of the things I look forward to when I travel is just seeing how different people live their lives and not doing just the touristy things. And we're going to spend our time in Antigua while we're there for essentially a long weekend. What else makes Guatemala special to you when you go home? Are you in a bigger city? Or are you out in a smaller town or village? Tell me a little bit more about that part of it that's special to you.
Like I mentioned, we do spend most of our time in a small town called San Martin Jilotepeque. What I really like about the small town is the small town convenience. Everything is right next to you there, so everyone in the town has a small business. Like every little house around where we live, they're selling tortillas, they're selling ice cream, platanitos, rellenitos, anything you could think of. Really, they sell, which is great because it's very convenient when you're there. So my kids really like the idea of going next door and being able to buy candy, chips, soda. They're spoiled when they go there, and they're probably eating more sugar than they should be. But hey, it's only a once a year thing, right? So I kind of let them enjoy that.
Was it like that when you were growing up in
Yes.
LA and going back as a kid?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. That is the one thing I remember about my childhood. I grew up around a Mexican community.
Hmm.
So I loved that I was able to go like to even in houses, they sold candy, soda, ice cream, chips. I was eating all that stuff when I was little, and I was able to just go right next door. There's a lady like a block away from where I lived that sold hot Cheetos with lime and ice cream, cokes, the Mexican candy, which I absolutely loved. Till this day, I love. So yeah, that was an experience that I got to live, and I really love that my kids get to live a little bit of that when they go to San Martin, because you can't really live that here where we live today.
When they go down there, do they bring back any of that mindset or that part of the culture with them when they come back to Nashville where you live today?
Oh, absolutely. So it certainly does build their confidence and financial aptitude. When they come back, they know that, oh, if I have, $1, $2, I can go out. Can I go out and buy something at a shop? Even if it's not nearby, kind of gives them that knowledge. Okay, I have money, I could go buy something. And so it's funny because even my 2 year old, she will find coins or whatever she finds. The other day she had $1 and she's like, okay, I'm ready to go to the store. Like, what can I buy now? Can I go buy candy? So, yeah, for sure.
We might have to rein that in when she gets a little bit older and is actually working full time. It sounds like when you're down there, there's a small town feel, but similar to the first conversation we were having, it feels like a truly different way of life down there. Am I reading too much into that, or is that something you notice when you're down there?
No, absolutely. I definitely agree with that. The lifestyle is very different. The circumstances are a good reminder of focusing on what actually matters.
Hmm.
For instance, people down there have their houses, they work, but however, they live on a day-to-day basis kind of
Hmm.
just for their daily needs. They're living every day as they can. And sometimes, I feel like that's a good thing because they're not so worried on having the bigger house or the better car. And to me, sometimes living that way is what's important. It's not necessarily that you're not ambitious, but again, you're just happy and appreciative of what you have. And to me, that's a good thing.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think that shows up as is just spending time with people. All the money in the world can't buy you more time. And when you talk about sitting down and enjoying time together at meals or after meals or when you're in town, making sure you see the friends that you haven't seen for a minute, even if it's just for a couple minutes to grab a cup of coffee and bread, that's some of the ways that I think that shows up in a way that's healthy for folks. Is that something that you're trying to pass on to your kids as well?
Oh, absolutely. That is something that I want them to learn and value is the time they spend with their loved ones.
Roxanne, as we start to wrap up here, one of the things that I think about when I think about home are the rituals and habits that I have when I go home. There are things that I do every time I come back to New Jersey. And if I've been away from Chicago for a little while, there's some things that I want to do as soon as I get back. Do you have anything like that about Guatemala? The things that make you say, yeah, I'm finally home.
Oh, yes, for sure. So there are two things that come to mind for me when every time we go back home. So the very first thing would be Pollo Campero. From the moment we leave the airport and the drive back home, we stopped at Pollo Campero.
Hmm.
So Pollo Campero is a Guatemalan fast food restaurant. There's no other one like it. Even though that we do have some Pollo Camperos here in the US, we feel like it does not taste the same as the ones in Guatemala.
And are they all over the place like McDonald's here in the U.S.? How do you find these?
Yeah, so Pollo Campero is In Guatemala, yes, you could find it in the city. You could find it like in the bigger departments, like Chimaltenango, Antigua. Not in the small towns, however.
Hmm.
And then you can find pollo campero in other Central American countries like Honduras, El Salvador, and even now in the U.S. and only in some states. So the states where there are more Central American populations, like California. We even have a couple now in Tennessee,
Now,
in New Jersey, New York.
Now, one of the things that I know, like we have a place in Chicago called Harold's Chicken, and you
Hmm.
can't really say that Harold's is good. You have to say the Harold's on 53rd Street is good, or the Harold's, in this particular neighborhood is good because they're not all the same. They're actually quite different, even though they're
Right.
the same brand. Is
Yeah.
Pollo Campero the same way? And which one should I go to while I'm there if I have a chance to stop by?
I agree with that. Not all of them are the same, even though it is the same chain of restaurants. I feel like each one has its own special taste. And to me, the best one would be the one in Antigua, Guatemala. So
And that's where
go
I'm
to
going to
that one.
be. That's where I'm going to be. So hopefully in a couple days, I will get a minute out with my camera as my wife takes care of some things she wants to do while she's there, and I will grab some chicken. She's mostly vegetarian, so I'll be going there by myself. What other things or rituals do you have that we should talk about here that let you know that you're home and you're back where you belong?
So we also go to the local cemetery and visit our loved ones, including my grandfather, my grandmother, my father-in-law. It's tough to go, and this time we went. It was a special hard to go. We went specifically on the Dia de los Muertos,
Hmm.
and it was something very special to me because it had been a year since my father-in-law and my grandmother passed away. One passed away in October and the other in November. So it was
Hmm.
especially hard for me to go around this time of the year, one year later. And it was also special because it was the first time my children were visiting the cemetery
Hmm.
and kind of going on that day, which was the Dia de los Muertos. That was new to them. They learned a lot about like the culture and what is done on that day. We got to see how other people spend their day with the ones that are not here with them anymore. We saw some people sitting at the cemetery, eating lunch and dinner with their loved ones that are not no longer here. So that was special. We took flowers. They had live music. They had mariachis there, which made it a bit more emotional for us.
Hmm.
And some people went to paint the tombstones, which is special to see, just kind of feeling that you're there and close to those that you can't see anymore.
Is the Dia de los Muertos a festive day? Is it really solemn and sad, or is it a celebration of your loved ones? What's the overall mood or atmosphere like when you're there? I mean, I don't think of mariachis necessarily as being really somber and sad on their own. I tend to think about them at festivals and celebrations. Is that?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of everything, I feel like,
Hmm.
because it kind of brings you back to the moment. I mean, the mariachis, they could play pretty sad songs. So, it's not always all festive, but it's also a way to remember them and to celebrate their lives and just kind of to have them near your heart and be like, I'm here today, I'm remembering you today, and I'm bringing flowers. It's a day to think and to remember those that have left us.
Roxana, in a couple of days, I'll touch down in the home of my grandmother in Guatemala and your home. And I'm really looking forward to the trip. And I just wanted to thank you for taking time out. I know it's busy during the holiday season with little ones at home and colds and seasonal things are running rampant. And I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to talk with basically a total stranger about your home, Guatemala. And I'm really grateful for that. So thank you.
Absolutely, Keith. You're very welcome, and this was very fun. I enjoy speaking and sharing my experience about my home country, Guatemala. Enjoy your travels there.
Okay, after recording this episode in November, we went to Guatemala in December. I was able to hop back on the phone with Rocxana during the holiday break. With all of the craziness around the holiday time and the kids at home, she was still able to carve out a few minutes for me, and I really appreciate that. In fact, you can hear the kids letting us know, time's up, towards the end of my chat with her. We don't have Taylor back in this episode, but I'll share a quick story about the trip after this chat. Rocxana, thanks so much for sharing about your home a few weeks ago. Since we chatted, I actually went to Guatemala, and we've actually been back a few weeks. But first, Happy New Year.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm glad you're back, and Happy New Year to you.
Now, Rocxana, when we chatted, you shared a lot of things that make Guatemala special for you. But I don't remember you saying how pretty it was in the countryside. You know, on our first full day, we did a hike in the mountains or the volcanoes. And the greenery, the sky, the peaks, everything was stunning. Do you ever go and just take it all in, or is it just routine for you at this point?
Funny you ask. Yes, I absolutely agree with you. It is beautiful. It's stunning to just look at all the greenery, the mountains, the volcanoes. It's absolutely beautiful. Yeah, I do take a moment to take it all in when I go. I do have some family that lives further in the country, like on the countryside, and there's a lot of land, and there you get kind of more of a scenery view versus where I typically stay in that small town. So yes, I do get a little bit of that escape when I go.
I admit it was a little bit weird because when we checked into our hotel, I went up to like this little balcony area that they had on the roof, and I could see the volcano, and there was a cloud coming from the volcano, and that's when I realized, like, oh, that's not a mountain, that's actually a volcano, and it looks like it's sort of erupting. It wasn't dangerous, but it was a little bit unnerving coming from Chicago to see something like that, like right next door, basically.
Yes, I get what you're saying. It could be a bit nerve-wracking, but it is really cool to get to observe that and see what it looks like in person.
Well, it was certainly a really pretty place to stay. And one of the things you did that most people talk about on the podcast is how special the food is for them. And I think I texted you or emailed you while we were there because literally on day one, I think I knocked out everything that you mentioned. You know, when I woke up in the morning, the hotel actually was making tortillas. And I was like, oh, good, I'll make sure I get tortillas. But then, Rocxana, everywhere we went, they were making fresh tortillas. It was almost like you described. It was just sort of what you do at every restaurant, apparently.
Yes. People will even eat the hot tortillas with chicken, with pollo campero. Like, they will be selling them. I believe there's someone standing, like, right outside of the door selling fresh tortillas.
That's funny. That's exactly what happened. And speaking of pollo campero, I asked our guide, I said, so which one should I go to? And he was like, they're everywhere. What are you talking about? And then he said in Antigua, there were two, and one of them was at a bus station. And so I went to that while Tasha was doing something. And you made it sound like they were like almost like these small chicken shack, McDonald's type places. This place was huge. I had a 20-minute wait to get inside. And when I got inside, there were hundreds of people there. I mean, this was clearly the spot. And there were two of them, maybe 5-minute walk from each other.
Yes, and it's absolutely crazy how full they could get. It's definitely like an experience for a lot of people there, I believe. Like they go as a family or to celebrate like a special moment. They do go there for that. So maybe that's what you were seeing there. But yeah, for sure, it does get packed.
I could see why. I ordered some pretty basic chicken, and it was really good. It probably wasn't as good for me as my doctor would like me to eat, but it was tasty as heck. And if there was one nearby, I think there's actually one not too far from me in Chicago that I'm going to go compare. But like you said, they had somebody out front making tortillas. And then even though I ordered chicken and French fries and a drink, even that came with tortillas. It was just like you just get tortillas with every meal all the time.
And did you like them?
Oh, it was fantastic. Like I said, I'm pretty sure my doctor wouldn't like that I ate it, but yes, I threw it down, and I was by myself, and I ordered plenty of food and just sat and ate and enjoyed it. The other thing that you mentioned was subanik, And I wasn't
Yeah.
sure where to get it, and I didn't ask you to spell it, so I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. But at the end of our first day, I think it was on the hike, our driver told us, he said, there's a spot that I know that you can go get it. And so I was like, well, that's where we're going for lunch. And my wife doesn't eat meat, but I do. And
Mhm.
it was really good. Like, it had chicken, beef, and pork, which is more meat than even I would normally eat in a meal. I probably liked the chicken the best, but what was really great was the gravy or the broth that it was in.
So that's the special part of it. So yeah, it is very important that you eat it with the broth. And so you could cook it with, if you want to include the three meats, then that's optional. Or if you want to do just chicken, you could do just chicken. I like to cook it with just the chicken, and it tastes just as good,
Yeah,
in my opinion.
what was really surprising for me was, again, it came with tortillas, but it also came with almost like a something like a tamale, but with no filling. It was just almost like the corn, and so you put
Yeah.
that in the broth, and it sort of soaked up the broth. And oh my goodness, I could have just eaten that all day, every day we were there.
Yes. 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 The tamalitos is what they call them.
Got it.
Yeah. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I definitely did. One of the other things that you mentioned was just the lifestyle and how going down there with your kids and spending time with family is just relaxing. Now, I don't want to extrapolate too much because we only went to Antigua and we spent a day at the lake. We actually just did lunch at the lake and went to Chichi to see the market. But I got to say, like, the people were so friendly and nice everywhere we went. And even the vendors, a little pushier in the market, but that's what happens in markets. But just walking around Antigua, there were people selling things, but they weren't pushy and they were friendly. And you would just say, no, thank you. And they'd say, okay, which is not typical of a lot of places. And it just seemed like a much more relaxed pace of life that I really appreciated while we were there, just like you told me I would.
That is definitely true, and I'm glad you got to see that side of it.
What I did notice is that Antigua seemed to be almost like a little vacation spot inside Guatemala, similar to like a Hawaii or an Orlando, Florida, or something like that for the US. I can't find the exact analogy, but the number of restaurants and hotels in this small town, there's no way like the local community could support all of that. So is Antigua, did I go to like a vacation destination inside Guatemala? Because that's kind of what it felt like.
Yeah, Antigua is a tourist city, typically where everybody goes to when they travel to Guatemala. And there's a lot of people that live there, you probably noticed,
Yep.
from a lot of parts of the world as well. So that is interesting that you mentioned that, because there is a lot of restaurants there that represent lots of parts of the world. They have Chinese restaurants, Japanese
Yep.
restaurants.
Yep.
I mean, Peruvian restaurants, and then you could keep going. They have a little bit of everything there, but that is because, again, a lot of people have come to live to Antigua from different parts of the world, and also it's a huge tourist city, so they have, I'm sure, countless of tourists coming in every day, all year long. So that's probably why.
That must be because a friend of mine told me a bunch of restaurants that he likes. His partner is from down there, and they were all French restaurants. And I was like, I'm not going down to Guatemala in Central America to eat French food. So my hotel person looked at me like we were a little crazy when she recommended restaurants. I was like, I'd actually like to get some Guatemalan food, please. We have Japanese and Chinese food at home. Honestly, it feels like if I ever go back to Antigua, I could probably just spend 2 weeks just trying all the restaurants and enjoying it. Rocxana, the other thing that we did that you talked about, although we didn't see the Day of the Dead festival, we went to visit a cemetery near the Chichi market just to see how well cared for, preserved, and decorated the different memorials to family members was. And it was really neat to see that part of the culture as well. It was almost exactly like you described. We even got to check out sort of a parade on one of the days that we were there, and heading into a night festival, the Burning of the Devil festival, where they had this paper mache devil that they poured gasoline all over and set on fire, which presumably had something to do with overcoming evil and overcoming some of the challenges we face in the world. But I have to say, our week-ish time in Guatemala was absolutely fantastic and certainly memorable for me. And I wanted to thank you for coming back on with the kids home and everything going on this time of year, just so that I could say thank you in person and share a little bit of what we experienced while we were there. So thank you.
You are absolutely welcome. I was very happy to speak to you and share a little bit about my home country. So thank you for visiting, and I'm glad you had a great time.
Okay, y'all, it's story time. In my conversation with Rocxana, I mentioned the burning of the devil, and I want to share a little bit more about that. We saw it as they were setting it up. We were walking on our city tour, and we went down a block and saw this giant papier-mâché devil. It was a little bit strange, so we asked our guide what was going on, and he told us about the festival. The next day we went out for a walk, and we were told that it was happening that night, so we changed our dinner reservations and planned to go check it out. When we got back in the evening, we saw this giant statue, and it was about 6 feet tall, and it was on a platform that was 7 or 8 feet off the ground, but some random guys just came and carried it off onto a side street, so we went with them. Now, the challenge here is that the side street was like one of those kill boxes in the movies like Clear and Present Danger, you know, where they ambush the convoy as diplomats or something. It was a 1 to 2 block long street, but there were no exits or side streets aside from the way you came in and the way you would go out if you kept going straight. I'll come back to that in a minute. We were there early and we were told it wasn't happening for about an hour, so I decided to get up close and sat on the curb, I don't know, like 20, 25 feet away from the statue, and we waited as they prepared it. As the setup was happening, we noticed a couple of things. First, some random guy came with a dude behind him, and they were carrying these giant sacks of something that I realized were sawdust. He climbed up this like makeshift ladder and started covering the whole platform with it, and I'm immediately thinking about little embers of flame flying off in the breeze and burning down part of the town. But that wasn't too crazy. We were like, well, they must know what they're doing. A few minutes later, another guy came with a big gas container, and he climbs the same flimsy ladder, and 1 or 2 guys are holding it, and he starts pouring gas all over the platform and soaking the sawdust with gasoline. When he gets towards the end, he dumps the rest of it all over the statue, and now gas is dripping down the statue onto the platform onto the road, and it's definitely not the safest approach I've seen because there's really no safety personnel or safety gear in sight. Then I start realizing I may be too close, but there was a problem. The crowd had now gathered to our right, and they were blocking the exit on one side with hundreds of people. They also brought a fire truck and an ambulance that literally cut off the street on the other side. But I wasn't worried because it was just some gas and fire. But then I noticed a couple other guys showing up, and they had these giant red things, and they were about 2.5 feet in diameter, and maybe 6 to 8 inches thick, and they were just casually walking up with them, and then they started unrolling them. In fact, they were giant, and I'm talking about giant rolls of firecrackers, and big firecrackers, not those little ones you played with as a kid. And each roll was probably about 30 feet long, and they had 4 of them between them. So they start draping this stuff all over the statue and the platform, which is literally soaking them with gas, which made me a little nervous because you can picture people smoking in the crowd and just sort of hanging out, being silly in general. But then inexplicably, they start rolling them towards the crowd. And so you can imagine they're draped around the statue, like almost like those gun vests you see in the movies with the bullets going crisscross. They're all over this platform, which is covered in sawdust and gasoline. And then they roll it down from this 7 or 8 foot high platform onto the street and start rolling it down the street towards the crowd. And I'm looking as they're rolling it in and out of the crowd, and people are literally standing on top of these fireworks with no concerns or anything. So we're looking and we're waiting for this thing to start, and the sun finally goes down. And of course, the one black dude that we see in the entire crowd of hundreds of people happens to be the special guest they've decided to start the fire. And I'm thinking, that's great. The one black dude here is going to start a stampede where people die, and he's going to be the one they're looking for on the news. So he grabs this torch, and they're having trouble lighting it, which is crazy because they just keep trying to spark this thing with gasoline all over the street. After the 3rd or 4th try, they finally get this thing lit. He goes up to the statue and lights it on fire. After about 20 seconds, the statue is burning and smoldering, and then the ribbons of firecrackers start going off. First, they're on the platform, and they're just like going crazy, and I can feel the heat from this statue because we were way too close. And in the kill box setup they have with these buildings and the cornered street, it is louder than you can imagine. I realized 2 things. One, I'm way too close because I was trying to take photos, and I feel bits of fireworks hitting my face and blasting my legs because I was wearing shorts. Second, My wife wants no part of this, and between the heat from the giant inferno right in front of us and the shrapnel, she's basically cowering behind me as I'm taking video and snapping pictures with both hands while I'm getting pelted in the face and the legs. This literally goes on for 4 minutes. I taped the whole thing, so I know how long this was. And these goofballs that were dressed up as the devil and these other characters are posing for selfies during the mayhem, and they must have been getting pelted, and I'm surprised nobody caught fire. Luckily, nobody stampeded, and we all survived, but I learned a good lesson about just hopping into a local festival and snagging front row seats. It was kind of a wild time. I'm glad I caught video, and I'm glad I did it, but next time I'll stand a little bit further back and try not to put my life in danger. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that little story about our time in Guatemala. Honestly, it was pretty crazy, but I'm glad we did it. Afterwards, we went to dinner and just laughed about the entire spectacle of it all. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Photos from the trip from Guatemala will be up with the episode at myhomeisspecial.com. Take care. Peace. Thanks for listening to this episode of My Home is Special. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast to get future episodes automatically. You can go to myhomeisspecial.com to see the full project and sign up for email updates. Be sure to follow KBevPhoto on Instagram or go to kbevphoto.com to see what I'm snapping these days. There's a lot on both to explore. For now, this is Keith, aka KBev, signing off. Peace.